Hello everyone, Mason here. How you doing? Today I'm talking about the Sweetpea series by C J Skues, consisting of 3 books, Sweetpea, In Bloom and Deadhead. Yeah, that's right, in this video I'm talking about a series because I've been a little bit of a naughty boy and binged 3 books in 8 days, pretty much non-stop, without pause, all day, every day. Do you really need to know anything more than that? Surely I can just end the review here because it's safe to say that I enjoyed these books, and if you trust my recommendations you should probably just go read it. So, thanks ever so much for spending time with me today guys. For now, I'm just kidding. You definitely shouldn't rush off and go and read these because honestly you need to hear me talk about them because there's certain elements to this that if you don't know about it and you're not okay with it, then you're not going to enjoy these, so yeah, stick around. I've been looking forward to sitting down and talking about this series. At the same time, I've been nervous because one of the biggest problems with being someone who does a lot of thriller reviews is that I want to hold things close to my chest. I don't want to give things away, so recording ends up being like this. I love the journey that Rhiannon goes on because I feel like it's a transformation. No, that's a bit of a spoiler. One of my favourite scenes from Deadhead is this bit where... No, that's definitely a spoiler. One of my favourite characters in this whole series is... a spoiler. Spoilers everywhere and not a plot to speak of. Anyway, you get the picture. When I first started watching Booktube, I saw so many people saying that they don't look at the synopsis before they pick up a book. And I was so confused by that because, well, then you don't know what you're getting yourself into. But after 6 months of reading thrillers pretty much non-stop, I'm starting to think that that might be the best way to do it sometimes. For example, we picked up Sweetpea in an Audible daily read sale a few months back. It sat in my library and I completely forgot about it. Then it was my partner's turn to choose the next book and she chose this one. I heard the title Sweetpea and thought, oh, a contemporary romance, that'll be nice. This series couldn't be further from a contemporary romance, and because of that, the first chapter of Sweetpea caught me so far off guard. Sweetpea centres around 27-year-old Rhiannon Lewis, an editorial assistant who works for a local newspaper in England's West Country. She lives in a flat with her boyfriend Craig and owns a dog named Tink that she adores. She's also a serial killer. Now in other reviews I've heard people refer to Rhiannon as a psychopath, which is something that I somewhat disagree with. Now you may be thinking, Mason, you're crazy, she's a serial killer, of course she's a psychopath. But it's not a label I'm particularly ready to slap on Rhiannon because there's so many different layers to a character. In terms of the dictionary definition of a psychopath, a callous, unemotional, morally depraved person, I'm not particularly sure she fits that bill 100%. If there's one thing you can't say about Rhiannon, it's that she's unemotional, because she has strong emotions. Is she antisocial? Yeah. Is she callous? At times. Morally depraved? Well, that just depends on your definition of morality, but she's not without a moral compass. She actually has a defined moral code, which is, at times, easy to understand, which is frightening. The question of whether or not Rhiannon is a psychopath is something C J Skues deals with in the first book, Sweetpea, and she does it in a fun way. Rhiannon takes a BuzzFeed quiz and refers back to it multiple times throughout the story as she takes actions that either confirm or deny the results of the quiz. The story is told through entries in Rhiannon's diary. Each chapter starts with a kill list, which is just a list of people that have pissed Rhiannon off that day. If Rhiannon was a booktuber, it might sound a little bit like this. 1. People who interrupt me whilst I'm reading to ask me what's going on in the book. Just read it! The next person who does this is going to find themselves taking a bath in a vat of boiling oil. 2. People who've read the book I'm reading and feel the need to give me spoilers even though I didn't ask their opinion. Seriously? Get a life! Not everyone needs to know your opinions on a story. It makes me want to shove their heads so far up their own arse that they're licking the back of their own teeth. 3. The guy in Starbucks with his disgusting, greasy hair up in a bun who was so desperate to get to the window seat that he squeezed past my table and spilled his frappuccino all over my brand new copy of The Silence of the Lambs. I was tempted to follow him back to his car and gut him right then and there, but I need to maintain the act. 4. People who dog-ear pages. We live in the 21st century, we have bookmarks, they're easy to get a hold of. It makes me want to cut out their tongue and use it as my bookmark. I thought the kill lists were great. Honestly, a lot of the time, they're really funny. Even if we don't want to admit it, even if we don't think of them as a kill list, we all have one, don't we? We all have people that are on the list from time to time. I know I do. A lot of the time the entries will be stuff that you find yourself agreeing with, like people that squeeze bread in the supermarket, block you into a car parking space, or walk their dogs in the boiling heat of summer without stopping to give them a bowl of water. See, this is the thing about Rhiannon. She breaks all my rules. Usually, I'm the sort of person that doesn't like villainous characters. I like the good guys, I hate the bad guys. But Rhiannon has quickly become one of my all-time favourite characters. Because the story is told through the diary entries, you spend a lot of time in Rhiannon's head. Although there are a few times where she may miss a few days or maybe even a week, for the most part you're getting updates on her day-to-day life. We're not on the other side of the wall, we're not subject to the act, so we get the unfiltered thought process. She's rude, blunt, offensive, foul-mouthed, but somehow extremely likeable. In the diary entries, Rhiannon says the things that you wish you could say sometimes, but never would. She's incredibly sarcastic, grumpy, irritable, but C J Skues manages to write her so well that you just can't help but laugh. You can't help but grow to like her. I think I'm a bit biased though, because Rhiannon's personality is as British as it gets. She's got that dry, sarcastic, grumpy sense of humour, and I love it. I think what's scary is removing the fact that she's a serial killer from the equation. I think we'd get along quite well. I think we'd be pretty good friends. Although I do think I'd end up liking her more than she likes me, but that's okay because I think that's the case with most people I meet. Some of the more negative reviews that I saw on Goodreads did say that they couldn't get into this because of all the British slang, which, I'll be honest, I didn't notice. But then I am British, so maybe it's just so deeply ingrained in me that I don't even notice it when it's there. There are so many things throughout this series that made me laugh, and I mean properly laugh. I actually invested quite heavily emotionally in this series. There are things throughout all three of the books that made me feel sorry for Rhiannon, and in fact, in the third book, Deadhead, there's a particular section that had my adrenaline pumping because I was so invested. C J Skues does a phenomenal job in my opinion. The emotional journey that Rhiannon goes on throughout these three books is incredible to follow. Even though she's a serial killer, I found myself fully invested, on her side, rooting for her. When she does something that may lead to her getting caught or puts herself in physical danger, I just found myself thinking, oh Rhiannon, why are you doing that mate? Don't do that, don't say that, why are you doing this? As the series opens, Rhiannon has been experiencing a period of de-escalation. She hasn't killed anyone in 3 years, but something happens that triggers a relapse, and I do use that word deliberately because throughout the series, her killer instincts are treated as an addiction. Although she managed to stay in control for those 3 years, unfortunately, when she falls off the wagon, she falls off hard. At the beginning of the series, she's like a tightly wound ball of string, but throughout the course of the first book in particular, that ball begins to unravel at an alarming pace. She begins to spin out of control, and it's unclear whether she'll ever be able to get it back, or even if she wants to. Even though the inciting incident that triggers the relapse is disproportionate to Rhiannon's reaction, I also found it understandable because when you're striking a delicate balance, when you've built yourself into a house of cards, it only takes one action to send the whole thing tumbling down, and that's very much what happens. On one hand, as the series progresses, it's hard not to look back on the inciting incident and place blame, because maybe if that had never happened, Rhiannon would never have killed again. On the other hand, C J Skues explores the psychology of a serial killer to the point where you're left asking whether Rhiannon was just a ticking time bomb, whether it was inevitable that something would have happened and set her off. Sweetpea plays with concepts that have been explored before through series like Dexter. Rhiannon has a type. She targets people that most would agree are pure evil and arguably deserve everything they get. She has a clear, understandable, if not justifiable reason why she targets these people, but the explanation isn't thrown at you via an info dump. C J Skues doesn't dedicate an entire chapter at the beginning of the book to say, "Hi, I'm Rhiannon, I'm a serial killer, these are the people I target, this is why, this is my backstory." Instead, she feeds it to you through drips and drabs, always leaving you wanting more. There's a puzzle to put together, a blurry impression of an image that slowly comes into focus throughout the series. Because the story is told through Rhiannon's diary entries, her backstory isn't offered to you on a plate. The information only comes when she's thinking about it because it's relevant to what's going on. There are certain bits of information, certain questions that aren't answered, that you don't get until the third book, and I found it incredibly rewarding. There is an exploration of some really interesting themes in my opinion. For example, vigilantism. What happens when the justice system fails? Does anyone ever have the right to take matters into their own hands? Can you ever justify the sort of action that Rhiannon takes, and does the potential good she's doing for society outweigh the bad, even if there is collateral damage? In the end, does anybody deserve the sort of retribution that Rhiannon is dealing out? And even if they do, what gives her in particular the right to be judge, jury and executioner? Throughout our lives, I'm sure we've all said something along the lines of, if someone did that to a person I love, I'd kill them myself. Or, I wish I could get my hands on them. Haven't we all seen a news article about a person that we deem a monster who deserves death? But how would we react if someone actually killed them? And is there anything that could ever push you to do it yourself? There's also an exploration of the fetishization of serial killers and murderers in general. Society tends to be fascinated by these people, and that's okay. They deviate so far from the social norm, we feel the need to understand how they ended up like that. However, there is the danger of elevating these people to icon status, where everybody knows their name. There are thousands of videos out there that will tell you what Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, or even someone like Charles Manson did, and whilst most of us will be disgusted by their actions, there are those who become fans. I'm not talking about being simply fascinated by these people either. If you own 10 books on the Manson family, that's not a bad thing, you're just showing a desire to learn. But there are people with such a toxic mindset that they end up romanticising these people, worshipping them as some sort of hero, even going so far as to torment the victims' families. I honestly think that C J Skues does a phenomenal job with this series. I love that she manages to make Rhiannon likeable, funny and relatable, but at the same time she takes the ball and runs with it, making you question how far you're willing to go and what you're willing to justify. There isn't just one layer to Rhiannon's character, there are so many, and each book reveals a new one. She has vulnerable sides. She adores animals and children, she desires to be a good friend, but at the same time she feels the loneliness of knowing that nobody knows who she truly is and would run away if they did. I literally blew through that first book. I couldn't stop, I couldn't put it down. Usually I can at least guess where a story is going to go, but with Sweetpea I had no idea. All I knew is that I needed to find out. Honestly, even the stuff that I managed to predict wasn't executed the way that I thought it would be. Skues balances the darkest of humour with an intense plot that feels so addictive. The first book ends with a cliffhanger that had me screaming, "Don't you dare leave it there!" at the phone, and when she did, I immediately, and I mean immediately, went out and purchased the second book and began reading it that night. The second book, In Bloom, isn't as fast paced as the first one, but there's a deliberate thematic reason for it that makes sense, and it leads to this build up of tension, so that when the pace does pick up towards the end of the book, it leads to this gruesome scene. Such a gruesome scene that has this strangely cathartic celebratory feeling to it. There's a strange character choice in book 2, but it's also incredibly interesting. The character is in direct conflict with Rhiannon, but they are hilarious, and the struggle between the two of them makes that book unlike anything that I've ever read before. Each book goes from strength to strength, it just gets better and better. By the time you reach the third book, Deadhead, Skues is telling an intense, epic story with great characters, adrenalising emotional moments, and an ending that left me desperate for more. The pace picks right back up, and once again, it's so unpredictable that I had no idea what was going to happen. Every time I tried to guess, I was totally wrong, and even if I got close, the execution didn't happen the way I thought it was going to. One of the things that Skues does that I applaud her for is managing to make a small, limited setting incredibly interesting, and she does this on multiple occasions throughout the series, especially in Deadhead. Not once throughout the entire series did I feel bored, feel the desire to do anything else other than keep on reading to find out what happens next. It just got under my skin. Look, the truth is, I could talk to you about this series for hours, and if you want to have a discussion with me, I'll be quite happy to. But the main thing you need to know is this is a 5-star series for me, and is definitely one of my favourite series of all time at this point. My recommendation is to experience this series through the audiobooks because the narrator, Georgia Maguire, is fantastic. I cannot recommend the audiobooks enough. Maguire captures the essence of Rhiannon perfectly. The attitude and the delivery are amazing. It feels like Rhiannon is talking to you. Obviously, you're welcome to read the physical version, but if you trust my recommendations, I'm telling you the audiobook is the way to go. I think Georgia Maguire is my favourite narrator that I've come across so far. What I will say is this series isn't for the faint-hearted or the easily offended. There are content warnings, lots of them, but I also don't feel that I can give you most of them without spoiling aspects of the series that I don't want to spoil. At the end of the day, guys, it's a series about a serial killer. If you have a trigger, it's probably in here somewhere, but at the same time, it's done incredibly well. In fact, it's done so well that it has a heavy focus on something that I'm usually quite triggered by, and well, it's quite clear how much I enjoyed the series. If this review has got you interested in the series, but you're worried about being triggered, feel free to get in touch with me and I'll happily have a discussion with you about it. But for those of you who love dark stories, I think that you will love this. Dan, I'm looking at you, mate. You at least need to read the first book, because I'm telling you, from the stuff that you've told me and the books that you read, oh man, this will be right up your alley. My question for today is this: who's your favourite messed up character that you shouldn't like, but you do? Oh, and if any of you are going to say Negan, prepare for my untempered wrath. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. Now press them, or else what? You don't want to find out, mate. If you want to get in touch, say hi and have a chat, you know where the comment section is, and the link to my Twitter is in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now, I'm off, and you should have a good one. Yeah, that's right. This video is discussing a series because Mason's been a bad boy and binge read 8 books. Sake. Yeah, that's right. This video is I can't do words today